So I'm just gonna pop some slides on the screen
Thank you,
and
IT
then
department.
tell us about it, Joe.
Well, we've just finished week 11. So these are the week 12 playoff pictures.
All right. Slide. Slide.
Slide.
Slide.
Okay. Here we have the most normal and concise playoff picture. It's the South Division. We currently have Atlanta sitting 8-2, Austin sitting 9-3, and Carolina sitting 6-3. Austin is done playing; they have no more games left. Carolina still has two more games against Atlanta, which are Atlanta's only games, and then one more against Dallas. In terms of who has tie breaks on who, Austin does not have any tie breaks. They lost every game to Atlanta and Carolina. And then between Carolina and Atlanta, it's going to come down to these next two games. So basically, well, I guess you can go to the next slide.
Oh wow, look at these transitions.
Oh,
Yeah, so this
I didn't
is
know that was in the budget.
this is how each team can win first, second, or third place. Actually, Austin can't be third place. They're going to be first or they're going to be second. They played like 3 good games all season, and they're guaranteed a top 2 spot. But if Atlanta wins at all, if they beat Carolina once or twice, they're going to be the 1 seed. If they lose both times, they're going to be the 3 seed. And if Carolina wins out, they win their Dallas game, they beat Atlanta twice, they're going to be the 1 seed. Otherwise, if they beat Atlanta twice and then lose to Dallas, high possibility chance, then actually the Soul would get first place despite not even playing a game this week. So realistically, it's probably going to be Atlanta, Austin, Carolina. But I mean, Carolina could win both of those games, in which case Atlanta slips to third. But yeah, no one else is in the playoff spot. Those two teams who shall not be named, except for Dallas in this slide. Sorry, you're out of the playoffs.
Yeah. All right. Pretty simple for the South.
Okay, this brings us to the West Division, and it's like super fucked up that I had to fit 7 teams on this slide. The spacing was a lot more easier to manage for the South Division. But anyway, the Shred have guaranteed themselves the first seed in the West. They've won the West already. The Summit have secured a playoff spot, but as you'll see on the next slide, they could be anywhere between 2 and 3. And then Oakland and LA are battling it out. LA has 2 more games, both against Oakland. Oakland has 3 because they're also going to play San Diego. San Diego, 2 wins, but basically a doubly better goal differential to the also 2-win Seattle. And then Portland, which I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about later, but they are 0-10. So yeah, in terms of tie breaks, Colorado has the tie break on Oakland, despite Oakland winning their most recent game. Oakland won by 1. I think Colorado won their first matchup by like 4 or 5. And if the Summit and Aviators were to be tied, the Summit went 2-0 against them. In terms of Oakland and the Aviators, they haven't played yet. They have 2 more games against each other, so no one knows what the tie breaks there is going to be. Next slide. Yeah, Shred I put in the top because they don't really matter. There's a bunch of stuff I needed to put in here. Both the Shred and the Summit only have 1 game left. It's both against New York. If the Summit beat New York, they're guaranteed the 2 spot. The only way they're going to lose that 2 spot is if they lose to New York and then Oakland wins all 3 of their games. They beat LA twice and they beat the Growlers. That would be Oakland 2 and then Summit 3. In terms of Oakland, obviously they can only be the 2 seed if what I just said happens. And for the 3 seed, if they win any of their final 3 games, they win 2 of them, they're guaranteed that 3 spot. So they beat the Aviators twice, they're going to be the 3 seed. They beat the Aviators once, they beat San Diego once, they're the 3 seed. The only way that there's going to be a tie here is if the Aviators and Oakland go 1-1 against each other, and then San Diego beats Oakland, and in which case it would come down to who won their matchup by more against the other. So
Yeah.
the Aviators really only have one path to victory. They need to pray that San Diego beats Oakland, and then they got to go win one of those games. But if they win two, obviously they also would just be in. They can hold their own destiny, but if they go 1-1, then they need San Diego to win.
All right. What's next?
All right.
Central.
This is the most confusing one. There's 4 teams that are still in it. No seeds have been decided yet. As we're recording, Minnesota just beat the Alley Cats by a decent margin, and this goal differential, the plus minus, is accurate, up to date. Minnesota's in the playoffs. They were in the playoffs as of last week too, but now their seeds are still very much a question mark. They have 2 games left against Chicago and Detroit, so they basically have 1 game left. The Alley Cats have 2 games against Pittsburgh. You would like to say that that's 2 wins for them, but you don't really know. Pittsburgh just went 1-1 against Chicago, who I guess went 0-2 against the Alley Cats this year, but whatever. The Union have 2 games left against Minnesota Madison, and then Alley Cats have 2 games left, both against Indy. There's a lot of cases where there will be 3-way ties. It honestly is like not super unlikely to happen. I don't know. I can't say I 100% know how the 3-way tie break works, but I'm pretty sure I do. And so if you go on to the next slide, there was too much writing. I had to put it into 2 different slides, but okay. So for Minnesota, basically, if they win any of their final 2 games, they're the 1 seed. They could still lose both, but as long as Indy wins a game, they're going to be the 1 seed. If they go 0-2, Indy goes 2-0, and Chicago, who would have been one of the 2 losses that Minnesota already had, wins their other game, then Indy would be the 1 seed, and Minnesota would be the 2 seed, and Chicago would be that 3 seed. But then if Chicago wins out, Indy wins out, and Minnesota loses out, which includes a game to Detroit, so probably not going to happen, they would fall all the way to the 3 seed. And then the Alley Cats also have a path to the 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, or falling out of the playoffs. If they win out and Minnesota loses out, I guess they're the 1 seed. If they win out and Minnesota wins just 1 game, they would be, Minnesota wins 1 or 2 games, they're the 2 seed. And then if Minnesota loses both games, but Chicago goes 2-0, they would also be the 2 seed. And then there's just like so many. This was so complicated. But yeah, if they go 0-2 and Chicago wins 1 or 2 of their final games, they would overtake the Alley Cats, and Alley Cats would fall to the 3rd seed. And yeah, if they go 0-2, which means that the Thunderbirds would go 2-0. Chicago also goes 2-0, then there would be a tie between the Alley Cats and the Thunderbirds, and the Thunderbirds just beat them twice. So the Thunderbirds would take that playoff spot, and Alley Cats would be out.
Damn.
And if you go to the next slide, that's basically what all of this says. For the Thunderbirds on the bottom, they have to go 2-0. They can't lose a game. And if they do go 2-0, they're going to be in the playoffs. It just depends on what Chicago does. If Chicago loses 1 game, they're going to be the 2 seed. So you could see a 2 seed Pittsburgh. And if Chicago goes 2-0, then they're going to be the 3 seed. Same with Chicago.
That's
If
nuts.
Chicago, yeah, I know. If Chicago goes 2-0, they're guaranteed a playoff spot. And after that, it doesn't actually matter what they do. They could go 2-0. They could go 1-1. They could go 0-2. And if Indy wins a game against Pittsburgh, they're just going to be the 3 seed. And then if Pittsburgh goes 2-0, no matter what Chicago does, Chicago's going to be out of the playoffs. They could go 2-0, but then if Pittsburgh goes 2-0, the 3-way tiebreak would just mean that Union's out of the playoffs.
Jesus Christ.
So yeah, they could also be 1, 2, 3, or out. It's insane.
This is nuts.
Okay, the East actually a little bit less
5
complicated than I
teams in
thought it was going to be. There's a lot of very clear tie breaks here. The only issue is Washington's final 2 games are against Philly and Toronto, who both have a path to potentially being tied with the Breeze if they win these games. So, yeah, Empire guaranteed. They've won the division. They're the 1 seed in the East. The Breeze are in the playoffs, but their seed is unknown. Glory 6-5, Philly 5-5, Toronto 4-5 are all in the hunt. And then we got the 0-10, Montreal not in the hunt. So yeah, Breeze win and you're the 2 seed. It's pretty much that simple. If Boston wins their game against Montreal, none of this matters. They also just would be the 2 seed and Boston would be the 3 seed. But if DC does go 0-2 against Philly and Toronto, then whichever one of those teams wins out, because they're going to play each other, they would be in a 2-way tie and it would come down to goal differential. But that also only matters if Boston loses to Montreal. So, Toronto could win out. They also have a game against Detroit. So it's worth noting that they could lose to Detroit, and that's what keeps them out of the playoffs. But, DC could lose both. Toronto could win out. But if the Glory beat Montreal, it doesn't matter. The Glory would just take over that spot. So, yeah,
So
Philly
it
and
seems pretty
Toronto.
locked in.
Yeah, Philly and Toronto are just like praying that Montreal can do the impossible here and beat the Glory. And then after that, it's not really super easy. They both have to beat DC, and then whoever wins their game against each other, they could probably be the 3 seed. So, this order you see right now is probably the order you're going to see at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
But 5 teams are still in the playoff race.
Yeah.
It's
So
pretty
Joe, this is
crazy.
awesome. Very informative.